So, guys, we know that there's three forms. We have standard form, capital AX plus capital BY equals capital C. We know details about standard form. A, B, and C are not fractions, they're not decimals. Most of the time, especially our worksheets, they make the A value positive. So if you end up with like a -2 right here, they multiply everything by -1, so the -2 will turn into a +2. We also know that standard form is great for finding x and y intercepts. Now we also know slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. And we also know point-slope form, which we learned today, where you could clearly see your slope, which is m, and also your point, which is x1, y1. So the idea is I could throw you any bit of information of any line, and you could write an equation and actually write it in all three forms. So for example, if I told you, hey, your m is 5 and your b is 6, then which form would you choose to write it in? If I tell you your m is 5 and your b is 6, what's the easiest form to use? Slope-intercept form, right? If I tell you, hey, your slope is 5 and it passes through the point 5, 6, then which one would be the best to use? If I tell you your slope is 5 and it passes through the point 5, 6, point slope form. So it all depends what information I give you, right? So how about this? You guys just gave me, I asked you for some coordinates, you guys gave me those coordinates. There is a line that passes through, you could imagine an XY plane, and you could think about the coordinate -4, 7, -4, 7 way up here, and then 2, -3 way down here, and there's a line going through it. But instead of visualizing it, let's actually use algebra to write all the three different forms of the equation of this line that passes through these 2 points. So let's start by doing anything that we can do. What could we do with 2 points? Slope-intercept form, right? Not slope-intercept form, but we could find the slope. So let's use a slope formula. So there's our slope formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And of course, we're going to get the x and y values from our coordinates. And this is our first coordinate, so I put x1, y1. This is our second coordinate, so I put x2, y2. You guys should be following along right here in your notebooks. And let's actually use the slope formula to find out the slope of this line that passes through these 2 points. So when I apply the slope formula, I always do the division and the subtraction symbols, and then I plug in my values. So what's my y2 value? Follow along with me, guys. Help me out. -3. What's my y1 value? 7. My x2 value? My x1 value? There you go. Now the only thing I could do is change the minus to plus. And up on top, when I do the math, -3 minus 7, that's -10. And on the bottom, 2 plus 4, that's 6. So I could still simplify that. Let's reduce that fraction. So my m is really -5 over 3, -5/3. So we found the slope, right? Now, if the instructions say, write the equation of this line in all three forms, okay, so we so far have a slope, and we also have some points. So it's up to you. If it says all three forms, we're talking about all three forms. You want to make it look like standard. You don't want any parentheses. You don't want decimals. You don't want fractions. You also want it in slope-intercept form, where you have y by itself, mx plus b, and also point-slope form. We need to write all three forms of this line that passes through the coordinates -4, 7, and 2, -3. So if I want all three forms, which one should we start with? Which one's the easiest to start with? Slope-intercept? Y equals mx plus b? Okay, now if you say let's start with slope-intercept, that's fine. However, do we have a slope right now so far? Do we have a y-intercept so far? We don't have a y-intercept yet. We don't know where it crosses the y-axis, right? So slope-intercept's not the best option. You could go for it, but it's not the best option. Point slope. Why point slope? Because you found the slope, and guess what? We have some points, right? So you could just plug it into point slope form. So let's to exercise the brain here. What is point slope form again? Y minus y1 equals m parenthesis x minus x1. Perfect. All right, so that's, whoa, let me put that in black right there. So that is our point slope form equation. And like I said, we have a slope. This negative 5/3 is going to go in right here. And we also have a point, x1, y1. It's up here. It's already labeled for us. x1 goes right here. And y17 goes right here. So let's do that. And you know what, guys? When you start using point slope form, it's a good idea to write it like this. Y minus blank spot equals blank spot, parenthesis, x minus blank spot. And then you plug in your values of x1, y1. So what is my y1 value? That goes right here. 7. There we go. Put a 7 right there. How about the m value? Negative 5 over 3. And what's our x value?
2.
Negative 4. Now, okay, somebody said 2. Now, it's good that we emphasize that we're picking one point. You got it? We're selecting this point. So we are going to put the negative 4 for the x1 and the 7 for the y1. Okay? You can't use this x and this y. That would be incorrect. You have to either pick this point or this point. I say go with the first point all the time just for the sake of making it or being on the same page. So we have a point slope form equation. The only thing you could do to make this point slope form equation better is to change your minus minus to plus plus, and that's it. So our point slope form equation is the answer, or the equation y minus 7 equals negative 5/3 parentheses x plus 4. That is your answer right there for point slope. Now, the instructions that I wrote up here say to do all three forms, right? All three forms. So far, we have one form. So how am I going to write it into a different form? What do I have to do? Since you already have an equation, it's kind of like having a piece of clay. All you got to do is change the shape of it. You got to mess with it, right? You got to change the shape of it. So, yeah, none of the other forms, you see this is point slope, right? None of the other forms, hold on. None of the other forms have parentheses except for point slope, right? So our point slope equation right here obviously has some parentheses. Now, if you want to change it into the other ones, whether you choose standard form or slope-intercept form, either one, neither of them have parentheses right here. So it's a fact, you're going to have to get rid of those parentheses. So how am I going to get rid of these parentheses right here? By distributing, right? Okay, so let me actually distribute. I'm going to take the negative 5/3 and I'm going to distribute it to the x, and negative 5/3 distribute it to the 4. So let's distribute that, and I'll have negative 5/3 x, and then the 4, I need to technically put it over 1, and negative 5/3 times 4 over 1 is going to be negative 20 over 3. I mean, if you put an invisible 1 right there, 3 times 1 is 3. But I'm not going to write it because that's our answer for point slope. Okay, anyway, we still have the equal sign, and we still have y minus 7 on this side. So far, I have gotten rid of the parentheses. So it's up to you. Do you guys want to change this blue equation? Do you guys want to change the blue equation to standard form, or do you want to get it to slope-intercept form? Let's say you hate those fractions, right? So if you don't like the fractions, you could get rid of the fractions, and that might push you towards standard form, because standard form is capital AX plus capital BY equals capital C, no fractions. So if you wanted to, you could multiply everything by 3, this times 3, this times 3, this fraction times 3, this fraction times 3, and you will get 3y minus 21 equals negative 5x minus 20. So far, I haven't changed it to any form yet. So far, I'm just messing with it, like messing with the piece of clay, changing the shape of it. So it's the same equation, I just don't have any more parentheses, and I got rid of all fractions. So since I got rid of all fractions, I might as well write it in standard form. So I'm going to get rid of this 21 by moving it over to the other side by adding 21. and adding 21 over here. So my new equation will be 3y equals negative 5x plus 1. And now my final step to get it into standard form, we said standard form, right? And it doesn't even matter, whatever you want. You could go slope-intercept. Slope-intercept, you would divide by 3, divide by 3, divide by 3. Or standard form, we're going to move the negative 5x over to this side. So since we said standard form, let's move that negative 5x to the other side by doing what? Adding 5x. And then what you do to one side, do to the other. Of course, you can't add it, so we're just going to rewrite it. Here it is, 5x plus 3y equals 1. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our standard form equation. So that's the same equation, just written in standard form. So yes, we have our point slope form that we found up here. We have our standard form that we have right here. The only form left is slope intercept. So slope intercept is having y by itself. So you could go back and continue with this standard form equation. And if you wanted to continue with the standard form equation, you have to subtract 5x and subtract 5x and then divide by 3, divide by 3, divide by 3. Or you could go back. You guys see right above, before getting here, we were at the red equation, 3y equals negative 5x plus 1. Right there, you could have divided by 3, divided by 3, and divided by 3, and you'd have your slope-intercept form equation. But just for the sake of not confusing you guys and making it all messy up here, I'm going to go back to this and just start messing with that one, changing it back to slope-intercept form. So I am going to subtract 5x and subtract 5x, giving me a new equation that says 3y equals negative 5x plus 1. And my final step for my slope-intercept form equation will be to divide by 3, divide by 3, and divide by 3. So my slope-intercept form equation is going to be y equals negative 5 over 3x plus 1 over 3. And we have all three forms of this line that passes through the coordinates negative 4, 7, and 2, negative 3. Okay? So all the equations are the same exact line. They're the same exact equation. All we did was change the way they look. Does that make sense? I hope so. So this is a lot of work. If we give you one of these problems, it would be worth at least 3 points, maybe 4 points. Why? Because one job that you have to do is take the two coordinates and find slope. That's one thing. After that, it would be writing the equation in point slope form. That's another thing. Then after that, it'd be manipulating that equation either to standard or to slope intercept. But nevertheless, you're doing like 4 problems in one right here. And please expect to see this on Friday's test next week on the 100-point test. So you really need to know how to do all this. First write an equation and then changing it to all 3 forms.